The Bucks have been arguably the best team in the NBA this season. They've currently got the best record in the NBA. They have Giannis, who is arguably the best player on the planet, and they're actually a relatively deep team. When healthy, we know that they're not just capable of putting up regular season wins, they're capable of winning it all. In this video, I want to take a look at why the Bucks are especially well equipped for the postseason this year, more than they have been in the past, and how this team is even better than they were when they won the championship back in 2021. The Bucks have the 6th best offense in the NBA since the trade deadline, which coincides with both some trades around the edges of their roster, acquiring Jay Crowder, as well as the team just generally getting healthy again, and the results have been really impressive. Their offense has been a lot more dynamic this year, not just relying on some difficult shot making from guys like Khris Middleton or Jrue Holiday, or relying on Giannis driving and kicking out to the perimeter or finishing at the rim. They're running a lot more set plays around Giannis in order to generate points. They have this introductory set that they run in the half court, and they're showcasing this sort of offensive flow chart that they have. We got a good look at this action in the fourth quarter against the Kings the other night. The first time they run it, Khris rejects the down screen, cutting across the nail to get the ball from Jrue, with Jrue coming to screen for him, but Jrue actually ghosts the screen and instead rolls hard to the basket. Now what this does is it prompts Kevin Huerter to be forced to show on Jrue's cut, which leads to Grayson Allen being left wide open in the corner for 3. Less than 2 minutes later, they're going to run the exact same thing, with Khris getting the ball on the wing and Jrue diving to the paint, only this time, both defenders want to make sure that Jrue's covered, which results in Middleton being left wide open for the shot. Not even a minute later, they do this same play, only this time, the Kings are going to do a much better job of defending the action, with Barnes staying home on Middleton and Fox following Jrue to the paint. Now the Bucks are going to be forced to reset, but Khris now has a mismatch on Sabonis, so he's going to drive before stopping near the low post and hitting Sabonis with the turnaround, and he knocks down the shot. This opening set is really the backbone of their entire offense because it's able to lead into so many different things depending on how the defense reacts. They have variations of it that can lead into other additional actions, like here when Joe Ingles cuts across the screens from Connaughton and Lopez so he can get the ball in the wing, and the Bucks are now in a position where they can get into a Spain pick and roll. Ingles attacks off of Brook's screen, and Connaughton is going to ghost the Ram screen from Lopez. Ingles stops near the elbow, and Connaughton notices that Booker is ball watching, so he's going to flare out to the corner to get the pass from Ingles for an open look. This play also doesn't need to start with a guard getting the ball on the perimeter, it can also be run through a big man out of the high post. Javon Carter feeds it to Giannis near the elbow, and Giannis blocks Trent from following Carter's cut, and instead of Giannis feeding it over top to Javon in the paint, he instead waits for Poeltl to sink into the paint, opening up a simple pass to Lopez. The Raptors actually do a pretty good job of defending this initially, but the movement around the perimeter is going to create some mismatches, so when Giannis drives and Van Vliet provides help in the paint, Carter's going to be left open in the corner for an easy 3. Here's another example from when they played Denver. Instead of cutting across the top of the key, Middleton instead jukes off of the screen to the 3-point line to get the ball from Jrue, and they get into the pick and roll from there. Middleton feeds Giannis on the short roll, forcing Jamal Murray to show help at the nail, and with Jokic sinking too far into the paint, Giannis is going to sling it out to Lopez. Jokic is going to close out pretty hard, which lets Lopez attack the basket, forcing Gordon to then provide help on Lopez's drive, and now with Giannis alone, Lopez just throws up the lob and Giannis slams it home. This actually leads us into another philosophy that the Bucks have, and it's this idea that you can create leverage on the offensive end by running your offense through 2 big men. Giannis inherently is going to create a ton of leverage anytime he's even close to the paint because he draws in all of this defensive attention. This leaves Lopez open for a pass since the Raptors are undermanned trying to cover the perimeter, as well as Giannis by trying to put enough bodies on him to slow him down, so Lopez is able to muscle to the basket for the finish. The same philosophy applies whenever Giannis is operating as a pick and roll ball handler with another big man, which in this case is Bobby Portis. Portis comes to screen, and with the Pacers hedging and Portis rolling to the rim, TJ McConnell has to sink to the paint, which opens the pass to Ingles for the catch and shoot 3. There's always been this idea that the Bucks have a fairly one-dimensional offense built around Giannis driving to the basket and kicking out to shooters, but but I think that this year more than ever, their offense is a lot more dynamic and creative than that. There's a lot of off-ball movement going on around Giannis, and it does a really good job of confusing and disrupting defenses. Notice how they're spaced out here. Giannis is inside the arc and everybody else is outside. That's kind of one of the core tenets of the Bucks offense, with some small exceptions that I'm going to explain, but they really only want one player inside the arc, and it's usually Giannis or Lopez. Once Booker shifts over to provide help on the entry pass to Giannis, Matthews is going to cut baseline towards the paint, but not fully commit just yet. Once Giannis actually gets the entry pass, Lopez and Connaughton are going to shift deeper towards the weak side corner, and Matthews is going to cut up to the nail to get an open look from mid-range. Again, the Bucks only have one guy inside, and that's Giannis. Now, the second that Giannis gets the feed and the double team comes, both Portis and Jrue Holiday are going to crash towards the paint, which forces the entire defense to sink inside, but that leaves Middleton open in the corner for Giannis to sling it out to, and Khris attacks the closeout before getting the shot to fall. The offense is built around Giannis as the focal point, but it's also rooted in some really tried and true principles that it works effectively regardless of the lineups that they have in. That doesn't mean that their offense isn't ever going to falter or that they're never going to hit a dry spell, but they negate this by having one of the best defenses in the entire NBA. I've talked at length about how important Brook Lopez is to their defense in his case for Defensive Player of the Year, so feel free to check that out if you haven't already, but their defense also benefits greatly from having Jrue Holiday as a reliable screen navigator, which is something that allows Brook Lopez to be so successful as a drop coverage defender in the first place. These two work perfectly together to not just make up for each other's mistakes, but also to augment each other's strengths. Jrue is able to focus entirely on defending the perimeter and point of attack, while Lopez is able to focus entirely on stopping anything inside the paint. As I covered in my video on Brook Lopez, everything inside the arc but outside of the paint is just a little bit of a numbers game, but it's proven to be a solid approach for the Bucks. Now let's talk about their core guys for a second, because I feel like people might have forgotten just how good this team is when their stars are fully healthy. In 259 possessions this season, when they've had Jrue, Middleton, Giannis, and Lopez on the floor together, they've got an offensive rating of 138.6 points per 100 possessions and a defensive rating of 116.3, meaning that when those four guys are on the floor together, they're outscoring opposing teams by 22.3 points. It's worth mentioning too that Jrue, Middleton, Giannis, and Lopez have never lost a playoff series together when healthy. This group has proven that they can handle whatever gets thrown at them in the postseason. Something that people bring up a lot when talking about quote-unquote regular season teams is how well is this going to translate to the postseason, which I feel like I shouldn't even have to talk about considering we've seen the Bucks go to the NBA Finals and win it all. But there are some good indicators that this year especially, it's not going to be a problem for them to translate the success they've had during the regular season into the playoffs. One of the most important changes that we see in the playoffs is that the games usually slow down. What this means is that the pace of the game usually decreases. There's a bunch of different reasons for this, but generally one of the biggest reasons is because defenses just simply play harder in the postseason, so teams aren't able to get out and run in transition as much. So with this knowledge, teams that are not only able to score effectively in the half court, but also defend effectively in the half court are going to be especially well equipped for postseason basketball. Fortunately for the Bucks, when going against top 10 defenses since the trade deadline, they've had the 5th best half-court offense in the NBA, scoring 105.9 points per 100 possessions, which may not sound that impressive, but anything above about 100 points per 100 possessions in the half-court is really impressive. Not a lot of teams are able to do that. Now, if we pivot over to the defensive end, again, it's not really a surprise. They've had the best half-court defense in the NBA, allowing teams to only score 93.9 points per 100 possessions in the half court. These numbers aren't the defining factor of who's going to win a championship, but they can give you a good idea of just how well suited Milwaukee is for the slower pace of the playoffs. So the question is, who can beat the Bucks? This year feels like a situation where the only thing that can stop them from another finals appearance is themselves. While other teams have faltered throughout the season and had to adjust and recalibrate, the Bucks have been the best team in the NBA since they've gotten healthy. Barring any injuries, which of course is never a guarantee, it's going to be really hard for anyone to beat them in a 7-game series. Huge thank you to all of my patrons for helping make these videos possible. If you enjoyed the video and you want to see more like this, be sure to subscribe and leave a like. That's the easiest way to support me and help me continue making content. If you want to help support the channel further, you can click the link in the description to become a patron. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.